Real questions, real answers for real life. Come on in and pull up a chair. You're at 1850 Main Street with Michael DelGiorno and David Zanotti.
Florida is improving its state standards for teaching in public schools. Why is the Vice President so upset about that?
Dr. Allen, welcome to 1850 Main Street. We love having you everywhere we go. If we could find a way to put a link to you in our pocket, we'd carry you everywhere. We just appreciate you being here, sir.
Well, thank you so much.
You have been doing some wonderful work behind the scenes on behalf of the people of Florida in regards to helping them create a curriculum, statewide curriculum standards. And you were given the assignment, if I understand it correctly, to watch out and watch over the segments of the curriculum regarding Black history. How long has that process been going on? What have you all been doing behind the scenes?
The Affirmative African American History Workgroup, which it's formally called, has been meeting since February, met through the month of April, to design new curriculum benchmarks and standards for the Florida curriculum. This is the first standalone curriculum in Florida for the teaching of African American history.
Now, this is not your first rodeo when it comes to curriculum standards and setting up syllabuses in regards, or syllabi, if I've that correctly, in regards to curriculum. Some of the other things you've done, just so people would understand some of the other things you've done in this arena.
Well, of course, I've been over 50 years in education, in the course of which I've done things such as supervise the revision of the general education curriculum at Michigan State University, in addition to having served on school boards and as president of a school board in California, where I lived. So in many respects, I've spent my whole career thinking about the very questions that are being posed in the state of Florida.
Now, Michael, I have to tell you, I've had the privilege of sitting in class with Dr. W.B. Allen. And I actually became an educational stalker late in my life, tracking him everywhere he was teaching and trying to find a way to listen in or be a part of.
Dr. Allen, what's the lowest grade you ever gave him?
The lowest you can get.
Did you DC, you had an F?
Well, not to DC, but
I was gonna say he's probably a boring, like golf, right? Just straight A's, right? Straight down the fairway, straight A's.
He's always a clear shooter.
But what a treasure to sit in a classroom and have a professor like this. But Dr. Allen, when you're putting together curriculum, are we really interested in getting history right? Are we really interested in understanding, or do you have to have, a sensibility about you that it all has to run through a political correctness matrix? That's got to be so challenging to do in this day and age.
It's only challenging if people forget that history doesn't begin with them, it ends in them. So that history has to do with those who came before us, who have their own stories to tell. And we do it well when we let them tell their own stories. It's really as straightforward as that. So you begin your historical study by being resolved to understand the people who lived through the history as they themselves understood it.
Now, Dr. Allen, I've had the unique experience of working with you on a project and a continuing ongoing project regarding George Washington. And we've been together and toured Mount Vernon together. We have sat and dialogued at key historical places. We've done so much work together. And Michael, in full disclosure, Dr. Allen is a member of the Board of Trustees of the American Policy Roundtable, which I serve as well. And so we're fellow board members in this project together. So we've been way in the trenches here in regards to this conversation, and in regards to the actual creation of new. I shouldn't say creation. I would say perhaps the restoration of honest history.
Right.
Dr. Allen and I stood together and walked through Mount Vernon and just talked for hours and hours, George Washington's home. Now, and so what I'm trying to communicate is, when it comes to telling the stories of history, Dr. Allen's work, after scouring hundreds of thousands of documents that George Washington was involved in his era, Dr. Allen put together a book for Mount Vernon, which is sold at Mount Vernon, which is a concise, edited edition of Washington's, perhaps you'd say, the most significant documents that he ever wrote, the letters and correspondence and speeches and things that he's done. This is a man who's been telling the story through the eyes and the words of the people for a long, long time. So him coming to Florida is an extraordinary gift to the people of Florida. And so I've reviewed the 21-page outline on this curriculum. I understand it's over 200 pages. I haven't seen every word yet, but the outline, I thought to myself, well, this is classic Dr. Allen work. I mean, it was beautiful. The outline, the questions, the course of study, beautiful. But evidently, Dr. Allen, the Vice President of the United States, doesn't agree with me.
No, she doesn't. And she doesn't agree with you because she's engaged in the campaign and agenda effort, not to tell the stories of the people who lived the stories, but to impose upon it a fabric that is intended to pursue an agenda in our own time. And, something wonderful has happened, and I hope you and people around the country appreciate this, because this is not a Florida story. This is a national story. And the thing that has happened is this, that the attack, the improvident and unwise attack by the vice president on the curriculum standards represents a loose thread in the fabric of lies that people seek now to impose upon the country. That means that the moment is ripe, the iron is hot, and it is time to strike, to unravel that fabric of lies by pulling on that loose thread. And that loose thread is the misrepresentation of the language in the guidelines, a misrepresentation which was refuted by the very grammar of the language itself. That makes this an easy target. People should look at it and say, the vice president, when she spoke about this initially, spoke falsely. When she repeated the falsehood, she lied. And therefore, it is important to pull that loose thread so as to begin to unravel the imposition, the fabric of lies that are being imposed on the whole country in the name of diversity.
Can I love the way you handled it with Jesse Waters on Fox. You don't get into the minds of others to determine motives, which I think is important. You obviously are a cooler head than two Italians like Dave and I. We might have handled that moment far different. But this is kind of this gets to a problem that's bigger than the discussion, isn't it? People often will say things like education has evolved into indoctrination. Politics has evolved into divide and conquer. There are a lot of things at play here that have nothing to do with you, nothing to do with this curriculum, and nothing to do with history. That we do have to try to understand, right?
Oh,
and
absolutely.
Our power is in the truth,
Absolutely.
I would think.
The truth is the fundamental criterion. And let us be clear, it is not hard to discover the truth. It is not an accident that Booker T. Washington titled his autobiography, Up From Slavery. Up from slavery means something. Mm-hmm. It means that he rose from conditions of oppression and took advantage of the skills he had to achieve level of accomplishment. And that level of accomplishment he achieved was achieved by many people from similar circumstances, such that people like Frederick Douglass and Ida B. Wells were able to say, these are testimonies to the power of American principles, and that the accomplishment of American blacks post-slavery are in fact the accomplishments of the America itself. So whoever wants to erase the stories of the people who lived through these histories are attempting to erase the story of America.
So where I'm headed, Dr. Allen, is, and this is something David and I do every day, and I don't get access to you. We know that the truth will set you free.
That was him being a little jealous, Dr. Allen. Every case now, he just kind of drops those little things, like the little brother who doesn't have the opportunity.
No. Very, very jealous. Very jealous. And the Indianapolis area is a favorite place to visit, too. So, no, but here's my point. If the truth will set you free, you would think people would always make the truth their goal, but they don't. Scripture talks about thirsting for the truth. We live in a culture that doesn't even believe in truth anymore. I guess what I'm getting at is the vice president can jump on this because agenda is more important than history. Agenda is more important than truth. Dividing and conquering is more important. But where are we going as a nation? Because a house divided can't stand.
Oh, so well praised.
Yeah, I mean, this has to be unthreaded and for our long-term good.
Yes, it's so very well phrased, Michael. Very well phrased indeed. As I said earlier, this is a right moment. We've been given an opportunity to pull a loose thread.
When you subscribe to 1850 Main Street, you're the first to find out what's happening next with new guests, publications, and events. And when you spread the word about 1850 Main Street, you're helping others find real answers to the real questions facing America right now. To learn more, visit 1850mainstreet.com. And please, tell a friend.
Dr. Allen, specifically, the vice president jumped on one line out of the 21-page outline in which the discussion was about slaves developed skills that could be used for personal benefit. Can you speak directly to that charge? And you have it on a number of media outlets, just in case somebody didn't catch it. What's the refutation?
Sure. I always begin by pointing out to people the grammar. I don't need to refute it. The grammar refutes it. Anyone who is basically literate and understands apposition and the relationship of pronouns to antecedents realizes the sentence says that the people who were held in slavery benefited personally from their own skills, whether they brought them with them before slavery or acquired and developed them within slavery. They benefited from their skills. That's what the sentence says. So that refutes the vice president. In addition, one refutes the vice president by simply saying that this is the story that the people themselves told. Frederick Douglass told it, of course, as William Wells Brown told it, as many people told it. Frederick Douglass did so in the most meaningful way. He said, "My slave master's wife began to teach me to read, and she was caught doing that by the slave master who forced her to stop. But she had pulled back the curtain just far enough for a beam of light to shine through, that Douglass turned that beam of light into a flame of illumination from which he benefited and his nation benefited." That's the reality that refutes the vice president. I don't have to do it.
What are they so afraid of in even acknowledging that?
Well, because, of course, what is the fabric of lies? The fabric of lies that Black people not only were slaves, but still are slaves. That's the whole story. That's the whole victimhood mantra that's being prosecuted and pursued by the vice president and others. So that if people no longer think that they are slaves, they will not fall for the lie. So you need to construct this fabric of lies to retain people in that status of dependent victimhood, where they think of themselves as slaves, so much so that we can even observe today that many recent immigrants from Africa have bought into the line of the legacy of slavery and somehow affecting who they are in their character and opportunity. Now, that's an obvious lie because they just got here. Mm-hmm. But the reality is that's what has been sold. That's what has been believed. And now we have a chance to pull the thread that unravels the lie.
Can I do one more? I mean, we see this after hurricanes. We see this after tornadoes. We saw this after 9/11. We saw it with COVID, right? So a tragedy hits because life happens. Bad things happen, as JFK would have explained very eloquently in one news conference. And then we become Nashville strong, Tulsa strong, because there's a victim mentality in America today. And I think it comes from this agenda. And of course, God calls us to be victorious. Yes. We've already won. Yes. And I think you're right. And I think the problem is not just those that are perpetrating this enslavement and control, but a willingness for people to be controlled.
Let me modify what you said and rephrase it not as a willingness to be controlled, but a vulnerability, a susceptibility.
Yeah.
Because, of course, what people are experiencing is the lure of false promises, so that they're susceptible to false promises and hence embrace the narrative that they're something other than what they are, rather than taking their comfort by returning to self-respect, a sense of dignity, and confident assurance that they can achieve through their own exertions. Now, that is not to say there are not social problems and political problems that have to be resolved. We come together as a people to resolve such problems. But we do not do that at the expense of people's own capacities, their own sense of agency. It is really important for people to know that they can make the difference in their lives and that those who came before them have done so.
Dr. Allen, I am very comfortable with your academic expertise, your credentials, and your pilgrimage as compared to the Vice President of the United States. Now, she's not here to defend herself, but this is just a matter of point of fact in regards to a biography. Is there more to this story in regards to generational credibility in the sense of where your pilgrimage has come from and where hers has?
Oh, you cannot doubt that. When I speak of allowing people who live the history to tell their own stories, obviously that's easier for me to do because it's my story. Because my people are people who have told this story and who lived those stories. That's not the vice president's case. Her background has more to do with slave owners than with people who were held in slavery. So she does not have these stories. And she can be easily, therefore, seduced by the false narratives. So the lack of the story in her own life contributes to her being susceptible to the false story and propagating it.
Well, one of the things that popped up out of the curriculum outline to me is you mention her as an example of extraordinary accomplishment in the curriculum.
Yes. Yes.
I wonder if she even knows she's mentioned in the curriculum.
I doubt it seriously, but I cannot answer for that. I just doubt that she's paid attention to it.
Yeah, that's what struck me as surprising.
That would imply that she's actually read the curriculum or read the outline and took it in context and in its entirety. I think it was handed to her as an attack.
You can be sure of this, and I'll tell you why. Because what did she do? She attacked and went to Florida on behalf of the Education Union in Florida in order to launch the attack. Now, what was the Education Union in Florida doing? The work group process lasted from February through April. It was an open public process. People were invited to participate, to listen, and to contribute. But they, like snakes in the grass, lay back and did not come forward. They waited until it was all done to take pot shots. That was all deliberate. And the vice president simply appeared at their behest to further their designs in a deliberate attempt to undermine rather than to contribute.
Aha, the plot thickens. So the people, the people at The View are not all that happy with you either. I just found myself last night fantasizing on the idea of you sitting surrounded by those women on television and helping them to understand what this curriculum's all about. Do you think they're going to call you?
I was just going to say, I don't fast and pray much, but I'm praying for that one.
Well, it is not something I'm likely to do. It's something that is even less likely to be presented to me as an opportunity. Therefore, I don't spend any time reflecting on what might have happened in that particular context.
I want to come back to the big picture because I think prosecuting this misrepresentation, this falsehood, and now blatant agenda lie is what it is. But when it comes to, we see it with misogyny, we see it with slavery, we see it in the gay movement. I've often looked at David and said, what is the gay agenda now? It would seem they've achieved everything. We're way beyond tolerance. We're way beyond acceptance. It's as if, and I always say this to David, the problem with progressives are they can't progress. And so they can't acknowledge that we have progressed and we have gone past something. I just got through watching the airport movies again. I haven't watched them in 50 years. And I mean, the portrayal of men in the name of a rating of G. I mean, they were like sex predators, adulterers, abortions in there. Go back and watch Airport 75. It'll blow your mind. But they can't prosecute anything today. So they'll go back in history in order to find something wrong that fits their agenda. Doesn't slavery fit into that? Doesn't the gay agenda fit into that? Isn't that what they're really after? Because they can't find it in today. And they don't want to have serious discussions that would unite and solve, let alone understand. So how do we deal with these people when they're so dishonest in the conversation?
Well, one thing I would say to you is there's a level at which they're not being dishonest. Your baby progressives, and that's what you're talking about today, are actually following in the paths of their father, Woodrow Wilson. And they believe the birth of a nation was slavery, and that its growth was slavery, and that its ripeness is slavery. And that's what Wilson believed, and that's what his heirs, who the baby progressives, believe. So in that sense, they're perfectly honest. They're following the tradition that they've inherited. The question is, why have they embraced Woodrow Wilson and the Birth of a Nation as a description of America, when all intelligent observers know that it was a misrepresentation of America and of American principles and a denial of the hope of America that is founded not only in our founding documents, but in the promise of heaven itself.
Dr. Allen, I know your time is extremely limited. Thank you for taking a minute just to step aside to join us in this conversation, because there's lots of people outside this room that are going to want to get a hold of you and for the next several days. Any advice for Americans catching on to this thing? What should they pay attention to most closely?
The opportunity to speak up. As I said, the time is right to pull the loose thread and to say we insist on telling the stories of the people who lived the stories as they told them. Just doing that alone in their school districts and wherever they are will suffice to begin to unravel this great travesty.
Thanks, Doc. I sure do appreciate your time. We really are grateful that you joined us. Thank you.
You're most welcome. What a pleasure.
So honored to meet you finally.
Yes.
God bless you, my brother.
It's my pleasure, and all the best, and God bless to you.
You never know who might be stopping by at 1850 Main Street, and the conversation is just getting started. To get connected, check out 1850mainstreet.com. We don't data mine anyone or sell your information. Subscribe today so you don't miss a single guest or conversation. We'll see you next time here at 1850 Main Street.